Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. For me, the hard part was I had night terrors. When I would have a night terror, I would wake up and feel like I was not quite 4 years old, and I would have to physically look at myself, reassure myself that I was an adult. I'd have to go through this whole talk. Okay, I'm not a little kid. I'm not helpless. I'm grown up, and I'm not in danger. It's okay. I'm going to be okay. I would have to go through this
dialogue.
I would have to go through this dialogue. Okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm not 3 years old anymore. I'm grown up. I'd look at my hands. I'd do something to reassure myself that, because in the night terror, I was physically and emotionally and everything. I was.
And you felt the helplessness.
Yeah, I was that helpless child, that lost child in terror. And anyone who's had night terrors would relate, because it's worse than a nightmare. It's more real. You're really there.
Wow.
And so I would have to go through that dialogue and bring myself back to reality. That's kind of what we have to do when we're talking to the kid that was lost, the kid that was, left behind. We have to go back and say, I'm grown up now. I can take care of you. I can help you. Also, you have to honor what they have been through.
I think for me, what I think is really important is that we don't know in the beginning, when we're first recognizing or first knowing that maybe we've been abused, if we've repressed it, maybe we see a checklist, you've been abused if this happened, if this happened, And so what happens is that part of you that is still feeling vulnerable gets triggered. So I was in a parking lot one day, taking my kids to school, and I saw something, and it didn't connect in my brain what I had seen. But all of a sudden I was breathing heavy. I was trying to get in my car, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And so I just stopped and I took a breath and I looked up at what I saw, and I realized that triggered me. It was just an outfit someone was wearing, but it reminded me of something. So when I recognized that, then I was able to say to that part of me that was still the little kid freaking out, going, they're going to get me, to say, hey, I'm here. I got this. Mm-hmm. You're okay. But for the longest time, I resented that little one, because I think in my mind, so when you remember being abused, or when you're an adult, you see yourself as an adult. So it's hard for you to go, oh, it wasn't your fault, because it's hard to imagine yourself as that child. But that child part of you is still wounded and is still fearful until we recognize and connect and become whole, basically. It's almost like a split personality, because that part of you that's scared, because you were nonverbal. You were 4 years old. You probably didn't have a lot of language.
No, I didn't.
So no way to explain it.
No way, and no one to explain it to. Part of it is there's a part of you that emotionally doesn't grow past that.
Right.
You're still, even though we grow up as adults, even though we mature and do adult things, that part of me, that kid that was left behind, is still terrified, is still emotionally, doesn't know that it's a safe world for him anymore. He doesn't know that he's being protected, because at that time he wasn't protected. He wasn't safe. He had to look out for himself. No one else was looking out for him. Because of that, it's important to, this is a hard one, because I know for me, when you say the inner child,
Yeah.
it's such a cliche thing. And
Right.
also, I didn't want to go back to my inner child because, it was a scary place for me.
Yeah.
It was a scary time, but that kid is still there and still scared and still emotionally doesn't realize that he's safe.
Right. And I think, like, for me, what was really hard is when I was growing up, we had these, I don't know if I said this before, but we had these pictures in our bathroom of these sad, sad kids.
Oh,
They
yeah,
had
the ones with the big eyes.
Yeah.
And
And so,
I hated those.
yeah, remember those? But that's how
They were
I
everywhere.
saw my little girl. And this sounds so irrational, but I resented her because she was weak, because I wasn't making that connection. But when I started to connect with her, when she would, like, when there would be a situation where she felt unsafe, for instance, when my kids, we'd be somewhere and I couldn't find them. That's when I overreact. Well, that's her. It's not me, the adult. And so recognizing her, and what you said was so good, because I had to learn to honor her and I had to look at her separate from me. I had to get a picture, which I don't have pictures of myself as a child.
Yeah, I don't have a lot.
And so I had to find a picture and look at her and say, she's just a kid. She didn't know what to do. She did the best she could. And now I have to let her know that I've got this.
Yeah.
I've got this. And I say what I do. Sometimes I take a minute and I'm like, so for my little girl, her happy place is sitting in a field with a horse reading a book.
Oh.
Then the horse is sniffing around her while she's reading the book, leaning up against the tree. So I always say, you go to the tree with the horse and you just relax and I'm going to take care of this.
Yeah.
Go to your happy place.
And it's important to recognize that that kid is still there, because when you honor the kid and you say, look, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to be there for you. And then you say, what is it you need? What is it you want? What is it that you didn't get as a child? And you can give that to that kid that was left behind. Then you will be able to grow past that emotional state of being stuck.
Right. I know for me, my little girl, I feel like she grew up in the beginning. She was very young and then she became a teenager. And now it's very rare that she shows up. But we grow them up as we acknowledge them and we honor them and that we let them know we're in charge.
And when we let them have the things, or we give them the things that they didn't
Experiences
have
right.
when they were young, then they get to have joy. And so they don't react to everything in fear.
Right.
And they're not in that panic trigger mode all the time.
Right. Because they can't let their guard down
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
So they don't get to have the kind of fun other kids have.
Yeah.
And so even as you're growing up, that child is hypervigilant.
And when you let that kid find a safe place and have fun, then as a whole person, you start to really experience a real life. Healing of, speaking of cliches, there was a saying back in the 80s or 90s, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. Well, that's what you're doing. You're giving that kid a happy childhood, finally.
Yeah.
You're allowing them, and you're saying, I'm going to do this for you just because I know what you've been through. I know that you didn't have anyone looking after you. I know, you have to honor what they went through, because they didn't. They were on their own.
Yeah.
And they were just little kid.
Yeah.
I know for me, I had a hard time facing that kid that was left behind, because I was ashamed, and also I didn't like looking back at that time. It was really a hard time.
If we ignore it, it'll go away, but it doesn't.
Yeah, but he was still a lost kid.
Yeah.
And I felt I was a lost child, and I didn't like going back and acknowledging that. But when I did, and when I found out what he loved to do and what made him happy and what made him feel safe, and I started taking care of him, then as a whole, I started feeling like a whole person.
Integrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been going through this a long time. So for us, this language is normal. But a lot of times with my clients, it'll be the first time they've ever heard such a thing. And they look at me, like, are you crazy? But so I always say, just give it a try. The next time you feel that feeling, which feels out of control, that is that child.
Yeah.
Whenever you're feeling scared or out of control, that child's reacting to something. And when you start paying attention, that's the first step, is just starting to pay attention, see it, recognize it, and start talking. You don't have to do it out loud if you don't, but talk to that kid. And you'll feel crazy. It does feel crazy, but I'll tell you what, the freedom that comes when you start to love that child and
Yes.
and let them know, that it wasn't their fault. You don't resent them for it, and that you're here. You're here for them.
And one of the things we did when I was going through therapy is we would get pictures of ourselves at that time.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
didn't have many. And it was really striking looking at photos of myself before the abuse, which there were very few. But then looking at photos right afterwards, and I just looked like a miserable.
Oh.
I mean, I looked so sad. I had school pictures, and I just looked like a lost kid. I mean, it broke my heart. But I didn't like it at first. I really didn't want to see those pictures. But then I started realizing one of the things when you're triggered, when you're panicked, when you're feeling, angry or fearful, or ask yourself, what age am I? How old do I feel?
Yeah, and you'll know.
And you
Yeah.
might recognize, oh my gosh, this is because I'm feeling that age. And then you can start having a conversation with that kid. It's okay. You don't have to feel this way. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you. I'm looking out for you. When you start having, and some of the things that are good, or to do a conversation, maybe just write a letter to your kid.
Write it in your opposite hand. So if you're right-handed, write the letter in your left hand,
Oh
like
my
you
gosh.
are that kid. Seriously.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I cannot write left-handed. I've tried it. It's so
I can't
awful.
hardly write right-handed. That's so funny.
Oh,
But it's getting in touch with that little one. And I think what was so amazing is that when I finally realized it, and I realized how much she was freaking out, and she was kind of a control freak. And so when I would start having conversations, she's like, no, I got this. And I'm like, no, you don't. And you don't have to.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
just
it's
giving her,
okay.
a pass. And it was hard for her to take that pass because she needed to be in control.
Yeah, because they are in survival mode.
Right.
And I was so young, I didn't even know what survival mode was. I just
Right.
knew I had to survive somehow. So when they take over your life without you knowing it, they're going to control you and make you do things that you don't necessarily have to do, but you feel like you do because you're panicked.
Right.
You're
And
freaking out.
when you feel like sometimes with kids, they do this and it deserves this kind of punishment, but something gets triggered, so they get that kind of punishment that doesn't measure up. Most of the time when we overreact like that, it has to do with that inner kid.
So it's really good to just reach out, let them know you want to have a relationship, because it's not always easy at first. Part of it is, I think, we realize that we treated them badly. At least I did.
Yeah. And also, it feels like we're going back to that thing. And you say this almost every time. It's already happened, and so
You've been
that's
through the
part of
worst.
it. Yeah. Is to say, hey, it's already happened. We've got this. And so because that child, just all they know is it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
That's the
just
survival mode, the
afraid.
fight or flight. Yeah.
They're afraid of what can happen.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find a way out.
Yeah.
So you have to have a relationship with them. And that's not always easy, but it's like, look, I know I've ignored you. I know I haven't treated you well. I know I've hid you or
Been
hidden
ashamed of
from
you.
Yeah. But when you do have that relationship, then you'll find out more, and you'll start to feel proud of who that kid was.
Yeah.
I mean, I look back at what I did and some of the things I did just to survive. I'm pretty amazed at the things that I had to do at that age.
Yeah. It's amazing how resilient children are.
But then the years after that,
Yeah.
the things I did just because I was trying to avoid situations. And,
Like what? Can you say what?
well, we had I'm not sure, a little storage area in the side of our house that I would hide in a lot of the time. And I would spend hours in there. Just
that
hiding.
makes me sad.
But we had all this stuff in there, and I would kind of play with it, and I would. But that was my safe place. That was how I knew I wouldn't be attacked anymore, or no one could get me there. So I would hide out there,
Yeah.
and it was a very lonely time. And I feel bad for that kid that was all alone.
Yeah.
But going back to him, and I told him, look, I know you were lonely, but I'm here now. And I see you now. I'm going to let you have the fun that you didn't have then.
Right. And hiding, saying the word hiding was a huge part of my childhood.
Yeah. When you are trying to
Stay
survive.
safe, yeah.
Especially when you're very young. Hiding's your only option.
And you're small enough to get into places.
Yeah, that other people can't find you.
Yeah. But I'm so glad that we talked about this, because I know when we brought it up a while back, you were like, I don't know. But I feel like it's kind of an important, not first step, but it's something you want to get in touch with when you start to recognize what's going on, because that helps explain your behavior. Whenever you just get triggered and you're upset about something and you don't know what, or you're pacing the floor, or, whatever behavior it is that you're going, what is going on? Then you can stop and you can ask yourself, what's going on? And like you said, how old are you? And pretty soon you start to understand what's going on there.
Yeah. And I think it's really helpful to look at yourself back at that time and, look at photos, maybe start conversation, write letters to that kid and just spend some time with that kid. Because I think for a lot of survivors, what we want to do is just get past it, get beyond it. Don't look back at that anymore. But that kid was so alone.
Yeah, and traumatized.
And had no one to turn to. And so if we give him someone to turn to, if we give him someone to have...
Yeah, look, there's an adult now that will listen to you and believe you.
That's where he can finally have hope. He can finally, feel like he's not all alone.
Right.
And I think that's what we all need to know is we're not alone.
Well, right. We all want to be loved and we all want to be seen. And think about it. As a little child, you're trying to be seen. Mommy, look. And then suddenly you're abused and you're hiding.
Yeah.
It's like you miss that whole part of your life where you're kind of figuring out who you are and what you're good at. And so you've got this little kid that doesn't even know who they are.
And they spend the rest of their time just hiding.
Yeah.
I know. I spent a lot of time at recess avoiding other kids. And that's when I got into the whole reptile and amphibian and other critters. I would just go out and look for, critters, anything I could find. And it wasn't, I think it was just because I was trying to avoid contact with other kids. I don't know on what level I was afraid of them, but I just wanted to be by myself.
I think there's an element maybe of they'll know. If they're around us, they'll know that something happened. Or
even just being afraid of being bullied being, I know I was the youngest in my class generally and kind of the smallest kid, so I was just trying to avoid anyone else that would, bully me, because I got bullied. So I just went off on my own.
So I learned how to just shut off. And so it used to be that somebody who was like a multiple personality was called a multiple personality, which is my mom. But there's also this thing called dissociative, which is when you check out. And
I was really good at that.
Me too. But then they changed it in the DMR, whatever that is, the big book. And so they said people that are multiple are just dissociative. And I was so angry because this book is telling me I'm my mom.
Oh.
And so that was really hard. But after I recognized the child, then sometimes I would have to check out. So I would purposefully check out. So rather than all of a sudden be like, wow, 5 hours went by. What, I was maybe reading a book or something. So then I would feel it coming on. So I would purposely, go find a place to be and to sit and maybe play a game on the computer or something. And it was my way to not think, to check out. And then all of a sudden I'd be ready to come back. But I had to learn to not do that, and so it's like, can I be present for 8 hours today? Can I be present for 9 hours? And again, that's that little child, because all of a sudden she's an adult and she has all this responsibility and she doesn't know what to do. And then some neighbor guy walks by that looks like someone you knew or whatever. So, then when you start to recognize those triggers, at least you know what's happening. And so you can breathe through it. You can do what you need to do. But as long as we avoid it and we push that child aside, healing is going to take a lot longer.
Yeah, because we've basically left an emotional part of ourselves behind. I think, there's a part of us that was emotionally traumatized and never got past it and never learned that it's safe, never learned that it's okay,
Right.
never learned that we're being taken care of, because
Right.
we weren't, and we never went back and said it's okay now.
Right.
You know?
And you wake up the next day like nothing happened and you go on with life, and yet you've got this big secret, and secrets are really hard to
Yeah.
hold.
And when you're that age, you learn to bottle it up and hide it,
Yeah.
but you still feel like it's there.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that's going to stop that from happening to you again.
Right.
And then when you become adults, that feeling's still there.
Right.
Like, it can happen again.
And there is nothing like the feeling when you start to know that you're healed. You start to react to things differently. You start to, you're not all of a sudden, things aren't ticking you off, like all of a sudden you're mad and you don't know why. And so I think for me, recognizing that and then being brave enough to face it, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to go through that again. And that's not courage. That's fear, because we've already faced it. And it's very brave to get in touch with that child. It's very brave to give them a safe place and make that connection. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to do that. And when you do, and when you finally make that connection, your life can really change.
Yeah, I know for me it was even hard talking about doing this
I
episode because I had night terrors. I would basically experience that experience again. I mean, it was full-blown being there again.
Did you feel like that would happen if you talked about it?
Not now, but I just remember it was almost traumatic to kind of go back and reach that kid that was left behind because of the night terrors and knowing what it felt like. The thing is, I really like that kid a lot. I realized when I went back and started having a relationship with that kid and started learning about him and what his interests were, why he would do things back then, I started really enjoying who he was. And one of the things about having a relationship with the kid that you left behind is you can go back and find the things that make you happy. I mean, I know now there are things about me that have changed because I went back and had that relationship and learned some of the things that I did back then that I really enjoyed. And I'm like, well, why don't I do that anymore? And I started exploring that. And you kind of become more of a whole person because you're not ignoring that part of your life.
Well, and also for me, I had a sister. And so just not too long ago, she was kind of reminiscing with me about how I was as a kid, because I don't have much memory of my childhood.
Yeah,
she remembers a lot, but I don't. But she's, I remembered after she started telling me, we had this play. We decided we were going to have this play in our basement, and we let everybody know. We must have written notes and given them out on the bus, and it was going to cost everyone a nickel, and they could buy snacks. So we had snacks that we had made. My folks weren't home. And so all these parents came and dropped their kids off, and we weren't very old. I mean, we were probably 9 and 10. And so we had like 20 kids at our house. We did this play, fed them snacks. The parents came back. They had no idea. But I've always had that entrepreneurial thing. And so it's good because it's like when I would look back, I would just, my mom called me an idiot, you stupid idiot. So when I would look at that little girl, I call her a stupid idiot. And so for me to start to look at her as, wow, this is who I'm becoming, as this entrepreneur. And that's what I was. And I was always looking to solve a problem, when I was a little kid. I mean, I found I think I told you this, I went and got pet rocks I lived on the beach. Yeah. Grabbed a bucket of rocks and sold them at school, but so it's like when you start to realize who that was rather than just shushing them all the time. It's a good thing. It's really a good thing.
It's amazing. I think part of it also is just realizing that wasn't all bad all the time.
Yeah.
And finding out what was the good parts of your childhood. Because I know for me, I don't have a lot of memory of my childhood, but when you go back and look at it, you start to find, the good parts, and you start to appreciate who that kid was.
And that's where gratitude comes in. So we were most of our lives raised over on Whidbey Island and grew up on the beach. We didn't know how lucky we were.
Yeah.
And so when for me, I don't look back and ever say I wish that didn't happen, because to me that's useless. But I can say I'm so grateful, not for what happened, but that I grew up on the beach, that I got to go to the high school I went to. I mean, I can start to find so many things to be grateful for.
Yeah.
In and around all of that.
Things to appreciate. Yeah, I lived right by a really cool park. We spent back then, I mean...
You lived on your bike.
Lived
right?
on my bike,
yeah,
and
too.
I still do. That hasn't changed. But it just, when you go back and appreciate who that kid was, you allow him to grow.
Yeah.
To grow in your life.
Yeah.
And you could start getting those stories back, the good stories.
Right. Because it's never black and white. Even the person that may have abused us, if they were a total monster, it would be so much easier. But a lot of times, especially if they're a family member, and there are things about them that you care about. So it's a big mixed plethora of feelings. But for me, getting in touch with that little girl and realizing, first for me, it was realizing how much I hated her.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first. I didn't talk to her at first because I just had to recognize that I hated her.
Yeah.
And I wanted her to shut up and leave me alone. And so then when I started to be able to look at her differently and start to accept her and love her because it wasn't her fault. See, I think that she still thought it was her fault.
Yeah.
And so that part of me was buying into it. And so then when I could talk to her as an adult and change that, I changed.
Yeah. I think part of the important part is to see what our self-talk to our lost kid, because when we have those moments when that kid is telling us to panic or freak out or run away or get angry or what is our self-talk to that child? Because I know I think mostly ashamed and afraid of going back there because I didn't want to feel those feelings. And I don't think I hated him, but mostly I just didn't want to go there. And so he was very lonely. And I feel bad because he was a really fun kid. I mean, I think when I look back at what we were like, when I was like as a kid, I was pretty wild and, crazy kid. But you have to look at what is your self-talk to that little kid.
Right, because that's what changes our brain. So it's like we have this freeway of you're dumb, you're stupid, it was your fault. And so as we get in touch and we start to say these different things, then we're paving new pathways in our brain. And then pretty soon you don't go there at all. Where in the beginning you still go there. But so there's so much involved in it, in just recognizing that child can change so many things in your life.
It isn't easy at first, but I think a good way is to find pictures or, find maybe stuff that you wrote back then if you have your schoolwork. Or
as a coach, when people are trying to find their purpose, a lot of times I'm like, what did you love when you were 7, 8 years old? And
Snakes.
Most people, what'd you say?
Snakes.
And
bikes.
Yep.
But,
there you have it. So, it's like finding that place, because that's where that stirred. That's who we are, right? Whatever our passions are, they were there early on.
Yeah. And take a look at that kid. Listen to what your initial thoughts and sayings are, but then try to have
relationship
with him and support him and honor what that kid went through.
Right.
And say, I had to basically apologize to my kid because I ignored him for so long and didn't support or honor what he had gone through. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. I wasn't there for you, but I'm there for you now.
Right.
I'm going to do whatever I can for you now. So you feel safe. So you feel good about who you are. So you shine, and then you'll become more of a whole person inside.
So you might feel a little crazy at first, but it's a good thing. And if you have a counselor, they'll tell you this. They'll reinforce all of it. So as you're walking through your recovery, this is going to be a huge part of it.
Sometimes it helps to talk to relatives or people who knew you when you were young.
Right.
And say, what
Can
was
you
I
tell
like?
me? Yeah.
Yeah. What did I do? Are there stories? Because I know for me and a lot of survivors, we repress our memories, and so we don't have a lot of memories. I know My brothers remember a lot more than I do.
Yeah, same with my siblings.
I have like huge mental block of a lot of my childhood, and yet to hear those stories was just such a joy because it was like, wow, those were really fun times.
Yeah.
It wasn't all bad. Right. And I think that's important to reinforce because sometimes we're just stuck on what happened and the hurt and the trauma and the pain, and we don't get to the other parts of our life.
Right.
And that's where that kid got stuck. Emotionally, was just panicked and scared.
Exactly. And I've said this before, I'm a recovery coach. And so often, whenever that person could be 40, 50 that I'm coaching, but if they started drugs at 13, that's how old they are.
Mm-hmm. Emotionally.
And so they have to literally grow themselves back up. Now, it's not going to take that many years because, and that's what you have to realize. It's not like, oh, my little kid's 3. Are we going to be 4 next year and then 5 next year?
No.
It happens quicker because I remember being a kid whenever that would come up. I was a kid, and then all of a sudden one time something happened and I was 13, and that surprised me. So my little girl was growing up.
Yeah, it's funny. There is a development, but it is quick. It goes pretty quickly. And part of it is you get to appreciate those years as you're growing up. You kind of look back, and I know for me, teenage years were not great.
Were they great for anyone?
But you kind of go back and appreciate some of the things that were good back then. You get to appreciate those things and find the fun again was what was important for me, was to find the fun again. Now I get to do things for that little kid that I know he thinks is fun.
You still haven't got him a lizard.
Oh, I've had pet snakes. I think he's done with the snake phase. Yeah, I've had a lot of pet snakes. No, I think for him, it's the bike riding now. It's a fun thing, and the exploring different places. And even though I still get a thrill when I see a garter snake in our yard.
For me, it's horses and actually radio, because when I was a little girl, I had a transistor radio, and I only heard men, and so I didn't know women could be on the radio. And so, in a way, this is my childhood dream that I'm doing.
That you get to be that voice.
Yeah, because it wasn't until FM came out, and there was a gal in Bellevue at a country station. Charlie was her name. And I'm like, wait a minute. So then I was like, I'm going to get into radio. And so, for me, that was, I'm living a life I love. And all of the childhood abuse, I won't say it's all behind me, but it's so manageable. It doesn't pop up unexpectedly like it did. Once in a while, there'll be something that you see on TV or whatever, and you'll go, oh, yeah, 2 years ago, that would really have wrecked me,
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so.
And we can acknowledge where we've come from without having to dive back to there.
Exactly. And, get a counselor, get a coach, get in the support group. You always say, call the helpline.
Yeah.
Do what you can. Take care of yourself. Take care of that little kid, because there is a life. There is a good life for you.
And that kid deserves to be taken care of.
Yes.
And I think once you do start taking care of that kid, you'll really get to find joy in your life. I think
you'll
that
discover,
was a big key for me, was turning around his fear and trauma and finding out how to make him happy and finding joy.
I love that. Well, we're going to wrap this up, but we are going to take a few minutes to pray. So if you're not into that, you can just switch us off now, or you can stay and say a little prayer with us.
Father, I thank you most of all for being the good Father for us and taking care of that little kid in all of us. You're the one we turn to when we need help, when we need someone to support us, when we need someone to guide us. We turn to you, and I thank you for being able to reach out to you, and also just for your comfort in our lives, Lord. And I pray that you would be a comfort to the survivors who are listening, that you would be there for them and reassure that kid inside that you want to comfort them and you want to guide them and you want to be there for them, that they are not alone. Lord, I just pray that you would be present in their lives and also present in their healing. And Father, I just thank you for your guidance tonight, and I pray that you would be a blessing to anyone listening.
And Father, I'm so grateful for free will, and it's so hard to understand because people get to hurt people, and that's really hard to take in. But I thank you that we have free will. Thank you that you love children so much, Lord. You make that very clear in the Bible. And thank you that we can look to you, we can rely on you, and that there is healing, there's forgiveness. There can actually be good things that come of all this. And I just thank you that the road to recovery can be it's a journey, but it can be a good journey. And getting to wholeness is such a beautiful thing. And I'm just so grateful for your love for us. And I pray for people that are just starting out, just realizing what's going on, that you will just help them to find the counselors they need, find the groups they need, and that they will just feel your presence in this, in your Son's holy name. Amen.
Amen.